Hello cave dwellers and welcome into the cave. This week we're going to be looking at this little thing, the RetroPie 9000. Okay, that was my, I really like RMC The Cave. It's like a really good retro tech channel and I look a little bit like Neil, so I thought it'd be fun to do a video like him and dress up like him, and it's probably just come off as quite insulting. I'm really sorry. This was a dreadful idea. Right, so here it is, RetroPie 9000. You might recognise the outer case because it is a NES that I've gutted, and inside the NES is a Raspberry Pi running RetroPie, which is a OS that houses something called Emulation Station that gives you a GUI interface, so you can go straight in and use it as if it were a console. I've done a few things that make it kind of non-standard. I've wanted a RetroPie for ages, and I wanted it to be its own thing, and I wanted something of a decent size that kind of sits under the television, because there are lots and lots of cases available that are very small, and they're really lovely, lots of really cool cases, but I didn't want like a kind of little thing that knock around. I want something to sit under the TV that you could just turn on and off with a button and to look cool. So what we've done is taken all of the NES guts out. This was a broken NES. I've not vandalised computing history. It's something very dear to my heart. So this was a non-functioning NES that was bought for me by Ivan. Thank you very much, Ivan. The Raspberry Pi was bought for me by my brother. And I've put in a custom LED, so this now is blue, and something called Petrock Blocks Power Block, which is an add-on for the Raspberry Pi, which gives me the ability to control power properly with the on and off switch. The goal of this project, as I say, was to have a functioning console that would sit underneath my computer, underneath my television, that I could just turn on and off like anything else. No messing around. Anybody could just walk in, turn it on, and there you go. The way it works is it has HDMI out, full-size HDMI out. I've stepped it up from the micro HDMI that's on the board, and USB-C power, so quite like you have on your phone charger and stuff. They are tightly fitted into the case, so they can't go anywhere. I'm not going to break anything. This is something I'm less happy about as a thing, but I kind of didn't want to throw any more money at this project. I think I probably spent about 100 quid. I'm deliberately not looking at what I spent over Christmas, with Christmas money and things like that, getting this done. If you include the cost of the NES and the Pi itself, which to be fair was not my cost. In here we have a USB hub. This is just a standard USB hub that I happen to own. It's not terribly elegant, but I've glued that in place, I've epoxied that in place, and we have 4 USB-C 3 inputs. So that means you could put 4 joypads in there if you want to. Any of your peripherals can go in there. You can also use wireless joypads over Bluetooth, which is a great feature, so you can use your Xbox One pad or your Xbox Series X, whatever it's called, pad. You can use 8-bit Do or 8-bit Do make wireless pads that you can use, so if you want to, it's completely wireless, which is fantastic for controls. Next to it here I have a cartridge slot, because I was feeling like a smart ass, you see. So the cartridge slot there, oh, my sticker's come off, god, that's no good for the video. This has a micro SD card slot on the board, and traditionally you pop in your SD card, put it in its case, and you don't really intend to access that particularly, because that contains your operating system, and your computer's hard drive essentially is an SD card on the Raspberry Pi, and that is a micro SD slot. What I did was I bought this, which connects with a ribbon cable to the board, so we can have full-sized SD, so it functions like a cartridge. So with this memory card, you flash your OS to it. I've got RetroPie on there at the moment, but you could put any version of Linux, Raspbian, Ubuntu. I believe people have got Windows running on it. And this then becomes a desktop PC, a Wi-Fi enabled desktop PC. And that's another thing, it has Wi-Fi as well. So I can connect, I've got this on my home network. I can go to my Windows PC, I can browse to the folder and put more games in it through Wi-Fi. Or I can just take my cartridge out like a game, you see what I'm doing, and then turn this into a little PC. Got no reason to do that. It's just cool, it's a cool feature to have. So part of the modification, like I said, is the ability to turn it on and off. Okay, so with pad plugged in, this is your generic Xbox One pad. Turn that on. You'll see my custom LED, which is blue. That's going to blink until everything's loaded in. I'm not a coder or a programmer in any way, but I added some codes to the config file for the system, which takes away all the boot up screens and the text, so it takes you straight to the interface. It does mean you get quite a slow boot, so you get a bit of a black screen, which is annoying. And also, since I installed the control block, there's been a bit of text there. This is my custom splash screen that I made on Premiere, so you can just put that on as an MP4 file. And once we're in, which will be briefly, we'll have to filibuster till it loads up, we'll be able to do everything from the pad, like I said, and you'll see my theme. So here we go. So you can get different themes. I've chosen this one for now, just seems like a classy one. You can make your own, which I'm kind of looking into because I'd really like to carry on the branding side of things that I've done here. So if I just go and choose a Mega Drive game, so you notice the text here has been collected from the internet. The console, as I say, is Wi-Fi enabled, so it's collected from the internet metadata about the game, tells you how many players, gives you a synopsis of the plot, stuff like that. We'll do a bit of Alien 3, it's one of my faves. With music by the incomparable Matt Furness, which you can't hear because there's no sound connected to this monitor currently, but it would also be a bugger for video, so there you go. And there we are, we're playing Mega Drive games. Pretty sweet. So it serves its purpose. I'm very, very happy. Importantly, we need the ability to turn this on and off safely. So like I said, I installed the control block peripheral to the board to allow us to do that. So pressing the button with a bit of script that's added to the config file of the system, it turns the system on and off safely, which is important because it's just like a PC, you can't just rip the power out. A off-the-shelf Pi just turns on when you plug it in, that's it. You don't really have that control. With this power block installed, push button to turn it on, push button to turn it off, and there it goes. Done, wallop, easy. So it does everything it's been designed to do, which I'm really made up about. To talk about aesthetics briefly, I was planning to do a Venture Brothers themed NES, but that didn't quite pan out with the paints that I got, so I went with black paint. I've gone for a Clive Sinclair ZX Spectrum inspired look, which I'm very, very happy with. This is obviously the ZX Spectrum stripe. We've got the font here. This was meant to be more squished. The lady who made my, or the person who made my decal stretched it a bit, but I don't mind. I still think it looks good. And I've got my little Raspberry Pi badge and metallic badge there, which I'm very happy with. Ivan's suggestion, it was Ivan, he said you could do a ZX Spectrum thing, and I thought, brilliant, what a lovely mashup. It encapsulates two things for me. One being, I'm in Cambridge, so much of British computing history is here, and the Sinclair building is down on Willis Road, which is very near to my house, which is where Sinclair was based, and they were also on King's Parade for a while, down at St Ives. So it's a combination of the British design aesthetic, but also the Japanese one, because the NES, the kind of the sort of brutalist design of the NES is iconic. It's a very iconic piece of gaming design, so I've tried to fuse East and West. And I think it looks good. I'm very happy with it, and it's nice under my TV, just doing its job and being cool, and that's all you can ask for, really. So this is how it was made. Right, don't really want to dwell on this because I'll kick you to shithole, but anyway. Right, so total teardown. This is all kind of gutted. Got the individual power and reset buttons there, excuse autofocus. The little kind of black parts from the case, and that's for the controllers. Got this flap off. As you can see, it's really yellow and sort of gross. And whole top piece, and I've sort of highlighted this, got loads of gross gack in it. So this is going in here. Soapy water in the sink. Yeah, excuse shit audio in camera, I'm sorry. So everything's had a bloody good scrub. Something that is going to have to occur now, which is probably going to be considered sacrilege by some, is these stickers have to go. And these ones are just kind of paper, so it's coming with the nail. I do think, however, I might try and preserve this factory sticker if I haven't bollocksed it enough already. And the serial number, because I could perhaps mask those off and save them from the rigours of painting. I'm going to have to get these feet off as well and reattach them afterwards. So yeah, might save that because it seems like a shame to murder it. But then again, it won't be a Nintendo anymore. But you know, whatevs. Right, so here's what we're retaining of the original NES. This has all been cleaned now, as you've seen, so with just soap and water for the moment. There's the bottom, all the panels and stuff are gone, stickers are gone. I might try and preserve this factory sticker and serial number for funsies, who knows. This is the original power reset button and the LED. Now, with a bit of know-how, these can be wired into the Pi to create a power button. I don't have the know-how, but my brother does. He's like an engineering student, so he's going to come in and do that for me. Original power resets, right there. Little plate for the joypad port. Little black kind of details from the top. The famous cartridge slot flap, which is gross and yellow. Had a scrub. And this one here, the top part. And also I've got in there with a brush. Had a good old clean of that grill. This unit does have quite a lot of places for ventilation, which is good. I've ordered an active cooling heatsink for the Pi board itself, which will hopefully help things run a bit cool for the more taxing stuff that I don't really intend to tax it particularly, but I think playing certain 3D games might do that. So we're going to have active cooling. Might think about adding some lights or something in there as well. We'll see. So next things next, let's talk about cables and stuff. So cables, we have here, this is a kind of SD card extension ribbon with a card slot, which is here. The memory for the Pi is flashed onto a micro SD, like that, the kind you might get in your camera or your sound recorder. And if I put the main board inside the case and I want to change that, I'd have to open the case. I thought it'd be quite cute to mount this in the cartridge slot like a cartridge, like a Nintendo Switch uses SD cards. So if I wanted to, I could just pop in a card with Ubuntu or a different system and turn it into a little computer and just sort of do some word processing or something. I probably won't, but it's a nice sort of feature to have, I think. In terms of cabling outwardly, the main outputs are going to be USB 3s, power, which is USB-C, and HDMI. Now, I want these to be kind of as neat and tidy as possible. I want the whole thing to look really nice. I want it to look like a kind of proper system, and I'll get some decals and stuff on there. So this is a case flush HDMI. So that'll run off the main board with an adapter because it's micro HDMI. And this will be flushed to the case. I'm going to use a Dremel to cut out a proper port because it's not going to fit in the existing ports. Same goes for power. So we're going to have a, this is actually the wrong cable, this is a micro USB. So I've got the USB-C coming tomorrow, but it looks the same. So again, case flush. So what you'll see on the outside is the port and a couple of screws holding it in place. So it'll be able to take the abuse of being constantly plugged and unplugged. And this one, it's got far too much cable, but you know, it should be fine. Raspberry Pi, this is going to be the guts of our machine. It's a Raspberry Pi 4. The 4 just came out end of last year, I believe. It's just a 2 gig model. I'm not going to put this through anything particularly strenuous. So what it is, if you don't know, is an entire computer contained on one board. So people use these to create servers. They've used them to create kind of ad blockers. Someone's used it to regulate a printer. My brother, I got him one for his birthday. He does engineering. He's going to like use it as part of a project. So you have a kind of fully functioning little computer. So we've got two micro HDMIs. We've got a headphone jack, we've got a USB-C, regular USB, USB 3 and an Ethernet. This is also wireless capable as well, and all the different power connections and stuff. So you can run all different operating systems of it. You can just use it as a regular computer. I'm going to be installing a front end called Emulation Station, which is part of RetroPie. It's loaded with all the emulators from RetroArch, and then we're going to put ROMs on. And what I want is a computer that I can just press the button on the front. It turns on and it loads to the nice graphical interface, and you can play all your retro games, which is perfectly possible and doable. You can also have a custom splash screen, like an animation, which I'm going to make myself in After Effects, so when it turns on it has a custom animation and stuff like that. So it's a very nifty little thing. That was 35 quid for the 2 gig model. You go all the way up to 8 gig at the moment, and I think that's like 85 quid. And the beauty of it is, the way I plan to sort of handle the internals is, in a few years' time when that's obsolete and things are a bit different, I want to be able to just chuck in the latest model, take out that main board and replace it like you would with any other machine. Right, here we go. So here's the pieces that we're going to be using. And we'll have a little talk about how I'm going to try and manage the internals. So let's have a look. Pop the old NES lid off there. So there's our Pi board. Probably sit something roughly in there. It would be quite nice to secure it to the main board, to the case. Doesn't flap around. I was thinking about perhaps ordering some standoffs, like which are little metal kind of legs, to keep that all snug and safe in there. I've already cabled this up and tried it, so that's good. It all kind of works. And like I say, I've got my case flush cable. So let's start with those to see how that will go. I'm trying to kind of cable up as we go, just to give you an idea. So we'd have our USB-C. So this is actually the wrong cable, so it won't really plug in there, so I don't want to break anything. So just imagine that'll be there, sort of plugged in, and then I will mount that probably somewhere there. So I cut that, got my hand in the way. If I mount that sort of there, then on the back we'll just have a nice clean little USB-C port stuck out the back, which is good. After that, again, case flush cable. We've got our HDMI case flush. So the output on, you have two micro HDMI outputs on the Pi. So what we'll be doing is adapting it down with this, popping that in there, popping that in there. Let's not break anything, Richard, that would be good. Wouldn't it? Lovely. And in a similar fashion, we'll find a kind of region around here, perhaps, and cable that out the back. And we'll have a kind of nice HDMI port as well, nice and clean. That I'll draw that out and do it all with a Dremel there, just so it looks neat. So I want the sort of back of the machine to look tidy. This I talked about already. This is my card reader. So it's just a ribbon. It's got a kind of dummy micro SD card there, and then your full-size SD card adapter goes here with the micro in it, or you can put a full-size in. So that would go in under here, like this, sitting here. Cable's fairly easy to work with. So what I want ideally, let's hope we get a bit of focus here. I'm going to find a way to mount this, here. So if we have a kind of mounted cartridge slot poking out the real slot, that'd be great, right? And it would just be like an old NES, and we can have essentially interchangeable SD cards away from the main board, so you don't have to open it up every time you want to change essentially the mind of the computer, because SD cards are absolutely expensive. So I was thinking about perhaps even getting some SD card holders and mounting them to the inner of the flap to just have them stored, and you can just pluck out a different OS or whatever. You could have a Kodi box or whatever maybe you want. So this is one that's gone slightly wrong. This has got far too much cable on it, like far too much cable, but you know, we're going to persevere. And I've tested this and it works, so it's great. So what we have there are two USB 3s, and then we have two USB 3s. And I'm working on a method. I need a bit of plastic to mount this, but those will plug in the two USBs there. I'll run the cable off somewhere, and then alongside our slot, we're going to have our two USBs poking out of here to plug the joypads into. So we open up the flap and I'll plug the joypads in, because, you know, it's a very classic piece of design, isn't it, the NES, and to utilise the flap would be the way to go. I did think about putting it in the joypad ports, so I'm sure people are asking. I can't get that to sit right. There's too many, these kind of standoffs are making that an issue, and I don't really want to cut them off. To be a bit messy, really. So I'm going to not do that. I'm going to leave the actual joypad ports in situ just for aesthetic purposes, just so they look nice, which I think they will. So that's that's how our cabling is going to work. So what we're going to have out the back here is a nice USB-C and an HDMI, like I said, and then in the top we'll have our outputs for the joypads. Right, let's talk about aesthetics for the moment. I went through a few different phases of how I was going to do this. I have some Venture Brothers stickers, and I was going to get some baby blue paint and do a kind of Venture Brothers console, but I couldn't get any blue paint today. I'm kind of limiting my contact with the outside world for obvious reasons, so I've had to go with a gloss black. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to do a gloss black system all over, top and bottom. So we're going to lose the kind of two-tone, but it'll be gloss black all the way over. with some red flourishes, I think, to lend it that kind of Mega Drive feel, because I'd like to split the difference between the NES and the Mega Drive in terms of design aesthetics, so halfway between Nintendo and Sega. This machine will be playing a lot more than just Nintendo and Sega, but I think, you know, that's my kind of golden age of gaming, so I wanted to sort of have those two eras. That's my compromise. So what we're going to need for that is some fine sandpaper. We're going to have to rough this down, put on this delightful plastic primer, so layer of plastic primer, buff that, wet it, dry it, same process a couple of times to get it nice and thick. Then we're going to go in with our gloss black paint there, get a nice glossy finish, and then our clear lacquer, so we get a nice shine. So it's going to be a complete do-over. I think I'm not going to, because I could try and retro bright the yellow out of it, but that's not really what I'm going for. I want it to be, you know, I want it to be its own thing. So that's what it's going to look like. Right, a couple of things have happened since I last recorded a piece. So a process I didn't record was sanding down and priming the case. So as you can see, the case is nicely covered in this grey plastic primer. So what that involved was taking some fine-ish sandpaper and rubbing down the whole case to make the rough surface for the paint to adhere to. That does include, I've got them in a little drugs bag here, like a sketchy it does include the power buttons, who will be getting a coat of paint as well. They're mounted on some blue tack at the moment, so I've been taking these out to the shed and coating them with primer. So it's ready to receive its layer of paint. What will happen next is I'm going to have to rub the whole surface down again, rough it up again with fine paper before I apply my spray paints. Once I've done my few layers of spray paint, we're going to go on with the lacquer, which should give us that nice shiny finish. That's the theory, that's the idea. Also, since we last spoke, I say spoke, that's a weird thing to say, I have dremeled in my ports. They're a bit rough, you can see a bit of a marker pen where I fucked up, but my ports have been dremeled in, so we can have USB-C and HDMI. And I've tested the new HDMI lead because we got one in the post that was a duffer that didn't work. So what will happen, I need to add screw holes to that HDMI. We'll have our USB-C just poking out here. We'll have our HDMI extension just poking out there, and they'll be screwed in tight so they can survive the rigours of being constantly screwed and unscrewed, which is good. Also, to mount the Pi inside the case, as I mentioned I might do, I bought these metal standoffs here. So what I've done, you'll notice that one's a bit longer, so the Pi will sit mounted in the case roughly like that, screwed to the bottom of the case, so I don't want any messing around, so it's flapping around inside. Probably going to cut this future Richard. It's rubbish. It's bad rubbish. Oh god, yeah, definitely cut this. It's a man around with a polythene bag. God. We have this heatsink with a fan, so a bit of active cooling. So the heatsink will sit on there once it's properly attached. Just pop that there for now, but that's fine. So we have active cooling on the unit. The standoffs will help cooling underneath. I don't expect it to overheat particularly. I don't think I'm going to be putting it through for anything terribly taxing, but you know, it doesn't hurt, does it? So yeah, we'll have proper cooling and stuff. I was going to close these ports up because I thought it looked a bit ugly, but I do realise that helps airflow through, and because I want it to sit on the TV, I want airflow to be as effective as possible. So we now have everything we need to cable this up, so we can get the internals cabled up. But what I'm going to do is Dremel all the new screw holes I need. I want to get all my dremeling done, so we can then paint the unit, because I want to get the holes, the physical drilling done before we apply the layer of paint, so it doesn't kind of crack any paint we've put on. So we're going to do that next. Yeah. Right, everything is wired in, and we now know from a practical perspective that the housing works. I've had to make a last minute substitution. I had my original USB 3 extender, which is not doing the job. Well, it works, but I think there's so much extra cable. Where I've housed the board, it's in danger of damaging the main board. So we're going to go with this, which gives us 4 ports anyway of USB 3, which should be adequate because we're only looking at kind of 2 pads at any time, and then it gives me the luxury of having a keyboard and mouse plugged in at the same time if I want. And we've got RetroPie running in the background, so this is based on the RetroPie software, which has been flashed to the memory card, as I discussed, and you turn the unit on and it boots directly into this screen, and you can have your games and such. So here's everything set up. I've chosen the pixel theme for it. We can have a custom splash screen. We'll get to all that. So in terms of pure practicalities, the unit works, and that's a big deal. I need my brother to wire up the power button for me, so I preserved the power buttons as I've said, and that unit will go back in the unit for the power there. So that's a whole other thing to turn it on and off in a fancy way, but in terms of what I'm able to do, everything is in, which is great. Right then, here we go. 6 coats of gloss paint later, and we've got our finish. It's very, very shiny. It's not perfect. I'm not a painter, you know, that's something that people do as a profession, and I don't do that, but I think it looks pretty decent. It's nice and glossy. There's a few imperfections, but that's to be expected. You can barely see it, it's so bloody dark. It's sat on my laptop at the moment. So, yeah, looking pretty good. What I need to do now is put a couple of coats of lacquer on it, which will just seal the whole thing, make it even glossier. But get some lacquer on there, maybe sand the seams down so it fits properly on itself, because that's a bit of an issue because of the paint build up. And then we can get the cabled up. So let's get some lacquer on. Right then, tour of the system before I seal it up forever. So we talk through what's exactly going on in here. So, Raspberry Pi mainboard, as we discussed, mounted on these brass standoffs, which I talked about, keeping it separate and having airflow underneath it. Heatsink now installed with that's passive and active cooling. It's got a fan that's connected to the mainboard. I need to code some kind of fan control because it will go on permanently otherwise. 2 things to note. These are both original components, so you've got the control board for the power and reset switch there, and these kind of back, I don't know the technical term, the back parts of the control ports. The control ports are there purely for aesthetics. I could have mounted the USBs there, but I chose not to. I just wanted to keep those there, so they're there. I need to desolder the backs to get those off. The guts to the power control board are staying because I'm going to wire that up to the Pi, like I've said, to make that a functioning on-off switch, which it currently doesn't have. It just has to go into the wall. We have a USB-C extender from the main board to the ports I created at the back. Same for the HDMI. So this is a micro HDMI to full-size HDMI, and then that runs. We'll get a bit of sweet autofocus action here. That runs to my ports on the back there. So we just plug it in and out. It should be nice and sturdy because it will have to withstand the rigours of being constantly plugged and unplugged. Now, the top section, like I said, I wanted a functioning cartridge slot. There's my microphone wire probably dangling in here. So, inside the cartridge slot, you will find a USB hub. This USB hub here, so we can plug in our joypads. And then this is a SD card slot, so we have a functioning kind of cartridge situation. So I've used epoxy to stick these in place. So particularly for the USBs, it's going to be mostly downward force. So that shouldn't go anywhere, downward force. This is a kind of force backwards, but I think it's a very light force, and it's not going to get changed often. So, you know, I'm not too worried about that. Just pop that back in there. So the way these are done is, obviously this is just a USB 3, which then goes into the main board here. And I've already discussed this, I think, anyway, but it's worth mentioning again. Can he plug it in though? Cut this out, probably cut this out. Definitely cut this out. Okay. And our card slot is done via a ribbon, and the ribbon goes in here into the micro SD slot, contact up, so we can read our SD cards, and that's our system. So now there's quite a bit of extra wire here, but that's fine. I'm going to cable tie that off and pop it there. Then we'll get our lid on. Then we have a bloody homemade console to play with. Okay, so we've achieved our final wiring scheme. So the power block, which I showed previously, is now installed. I've had to change the risers on the board so that sits nice and sturdy, isn't going anywhere because it's got the power lead in it and stuff, so that is in nice and tough, not going anywhere. And that just connects to the pins on the main board. Screw that in place. I have power going to my new LED, my new blue LED, which replaces the existing red one, and that sits nicely in the housing there. That's a 5mm LED. So we've retained, as I described, the original NES power switch configuration, so I can use this button, turn it off and on. With the power block installed, I've also run the software side, so I had to install a software package from Linux, which then means I can turn it off and on using that one button like a console. Because if you just kind of yank the power out like any kind of computer, it's not great for the stuff stored on the SD card or the hard drive in the case of a computer. So this is a little bit of script that turns it on, easy peasy, and when you turn it off, it properly shuts it down. So we've achieved the goal of having a complete video game console that boots like a video game console and turns off like a video game console and doesn't behave at all like a PC. Except in all the ways it does behave like a PC. I've just taped the wiring down with a bit of electrical tape here in a horribly unprofessional way, but you know, we're going to close this up and no one will see it again. The one compromise I had to make was that we've lost our heatsink because it did not sit with the power block. So I've not had any issues with cooling. The system hasn't overheated at all yet. We'll see, because of the more 3D intensive games might cause issues. I'm going to look at a different cooling solution. I might just have to have some kind of passive cooling, or maybe just a case fan that I can run off some of the pins. We'll see. If that becomes an issue, I will deal with it, but I intend now to seal this up and not open it again. Okay, change of plans. Initially I just wired up the original NES power switch here to the board by twisting the wires together with a bit of tape, and it started to fail, and I thought, you know what, I'm just being a bit bloody lazy. So what I've done, I've removed the original wiring completely from the equation. I've desoldered it from the board. I've soldered in my nice can we get some focus? I've just soldered in some nice modern cables there, and there's a nice clean run from the original power assembly to the new board. which is a lot better. So despite me saying that's my final wiring, it's not. So now if I turn this on, there we go. So you've got mainboard light, we've got our glowing boot up light for the Pi. So yeah, not exactly fire wiring. This is my final wiring. Just need to put this all back together and we're pretty much ready to go. Okay, so that is how you make your own console in lockdown. If you stumbled upon this video because you're looking at computing history stuff, this channel does not normally do this. It's kind of a one-off, just a fun project that I wanted to share with everybody. But if you do like grown men swearing about movies, do consider liking the video and subscribing. We do movie live streams every Thursday, and we're on Patreon where there's exclusive content and you can go find all our social media and all that. So I'm off to play some old arcade games. I'll see you later.